Hello, this is for the subject risk management for financial management students, and the topic for this video is risk assessment considerations. This is chapter 13 of the resource material that we're using, right? So we begin with the importance of risk assessment, okay? So risk assessment, essentially yun yung process of analyzing the different types of risk na ma-identify ng isang company, okay? So, itong risk recognition and risk-taking, yun yung bumubuo sa risk assessment. Okay, so it's still part of the risk management process. Okay. So, risk assessment, recognition of risk. Okay. So, di ba, normally companies would identify hundreds of risks, but then not all of those risks are significant enough or impactful enough for them to, give them attention. So they try to analyze them and then rate the risk for them to determine kung alin yung nangangailangan talaga ng attention nila, nangangailangan ng, diba, yung treatments natin, the tolerate, treat, transfer, and force terminate, okay, if possible. And then the overall process of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. So, yun yung definition naman sa British Standard, okay, ng risk assessment. So, in a way, mapapansin nyo medyo paulit-ulit yung content ng material, but essentially it's just trying to emphasize or highlight yung mga important details dun sa risk management process. Okay. Before, we've had parang overview pa lang ng risk management process, but here we're trying to tawag doon, hina-highlight yung bawat process. Kasi diba we have 7 R's and in the 40s. Okay? So, dito, in-identify ulit yung significant risk that could impact the selected feature. Okay? Yung risk assessment, only useful if the conclusions of the assessment are used to inform decisions and or to identify the appropriate risk responses. Okay? So, parang yung paper nyo lang, research work nyo sa college, di ba? It's only useful kung nagagamit siya in actual or in reality. After nyo i-conduct yung study nyo, how did it help yung mga respondents nyo or di ba yung mga na-identify nyo na beneficiaries ng study? Okay, so if it's only going to, to go into the shelf sa inyong library sa school nyo and hindi siya magagamit in actual implementation, then it's not really going to be useful. Okay, same with risk management plans. It has to be implemented for it to be useful. Okay, and during implementation naman, you have to make sure na you've considered the reality in the organization. That's why very customized ang ating risk management plans depending on the company na gumagamit ng risk management. Okay. So, yung assessment, consider siya as a starting point ng risk management process. Okay, sisimula pa lang kasi andyan nga yung risk identification or risk recognition saka risk rating. Okay? Ayan. Decision to be made whether the identified risk is going to be evaluated at the inherent level or at the current or residual level. Okay, so you have two types of assessments and sometimes companies do both actually. Yung sa inherent level, again, before considering any controls in place sa company. Okay, and then yung current level naman, ito yung kapag meron ng controls na naka-implement. Okay. But anyhow, kumbaga, if you actually assess them using both, what you're going to see is yung effectiveness ng controls. Kung ano yung maging difference, yun yung ini-imply lang, how effective the controls are. Okay? So, yun, indication of the importance of existing control measures. Okay, tapos we have different approaches to risk assessment. One of the key decisions will be who to involve in the risk assessment exercise. Okay, so most of the time, edi kung sino yung normally nagdi-deal with dun sa particular risk, edi sila dapat, yung maging responsible for it, sila yung magbigay ng report on how it affects the company and the possible, hanggang dun sa dulo, ng process, hanggang dun sa pag-identify ng possible courses of action to treat the different types of risk. Okay? But anyway, we have two approaches. Yung tinatawag natin na top-down exercise. Ibig sabihin, nagsisimula siya sa taas from the board of directors, from the top-level management. Tapos, nagtitrickle down siya sa organization, papunta sa middle managers, papunta sa department heads, and then papunta sa, of course, the rank and file employees, the actual people who are dealing or kumbaga first-hand experience dun sa risk. And then yung second one naman is yung bottom-up approach. Mag-start siya sa baba, from the tawag dito, department members, department employees, and then you have your department heads. Pataas naman siya. Kumbaga reporting ang style niya. The people who are experiencing it, who are dealing with it at the, the lowest level. Parang siya yung, essentially siya yung first-hand experience talaga. Diba? Kasi sila yung mismong nandun na nakakaranas ng risk. Okay? And then, what they do is that they report it to the top, to the decision makers. Kasi, silang nasa baba, hindi naman kasi sila yung basta-basta makakapag decide on what to do unless meron ng manual. Okay, but if there is no manual yet, then they have to, report it and let the decision makers know and then ask them for, actions to take kung anong dapat nilang gawin. Okay. The opinion of the Chief Executive Officer is critically important, especially as it helps to define the overall attitude of the organization to risk. Okay. So, meron naman mga CEO na, aware on what's going on in the company. And sometimes, kumbaga yung, what do you call this, meron siyang enough knowledge on business to understand that there is really the possibility of those types of risk in the company. And, syempre, iniisip din naman niya kung anong gagawin if ever it shows up in reality. Okay? So, ayun, kumbaga kapag andyan na yung situation, hindi na siya magugulat kasi it has been considered na as a possibility before. Okay? And that shows na yung top management is, in a way, gives importance to risk management then. And nare-recognize din yung talagang existence ng risk in the business. Okay? Ayun. So, it would depend din naman talaga on what type of person the CEO is. So, I don't want to make generalizations on that. But dito sa book, merong binanggit. Focus is likely to be on external risk. In a way, may pagka-true siya. Okay, kasi as a CEO, if you're really concerned with your company, with your business, you would already know what's really going on inside the company and if there are any risks na considered na siya, and of course, you tried to mitigate the effects already by implementing controls. And kung ano yung controls in place, most of the time, currently, yun na yun. Okay? Kumbaga, there are nothing new to implement to help lessen pa yung effect ng risk. Pero kumbaga, kung ano yung controls na nandyan, yan na yung, kumbaga, we think are the best controls to help us mitigate the effects of the risk. Okay? Kaya yung nagiging focus usually ng mga CEOs, ay yung mga external risk na lang. Kasi yung sa internal, kumbaga, we've already did our best and what's already being implemented, yan na yung kaya natin. Okay, but because again, sometimes other people would think na parang hindi pa naman yan yung best. There could be, better things to do, to conduct, to implement. Pero you have to understand na, different businesses, they have, different struggles, they have different resources, they have different limitations. So, minsan, kahit sabihin mo na, there's this one that they could try, but then, you'd realize na consider na siya ng management, but, you know, because of the constraints nga, they were unable to implement it. Okay? Hindi naman po kaya yung best is it should be implemented by the management because, you know, again, constraints. Yun yung reality. Okay? It's important that the approach that is adopted is consistent with the culture of the organization, which is why, yun nga, decision maker pa rin naman. Okay? With regards to risk management, majority of the decisions would come from the top pa din. Okay? And of course, mas maganda kung, you know, ini-include na siya as part of the manual and then para maging guidelines na siya ng, you know, other employees if a similar situation occurs in the future. Okay. Use of voting software. Okay. So, di ba you have your different departments nga sa isang company. Of course, sometimes there are particular risks na nakaka-affect sa isang particular department lang, and then you have other types of risks na nakaka-affect ng iba't ibang department, right? And then yung effect niya on the different departments would be slightly different then, or, you know, of course, different din naman kasi iba yung focus ng bawat department. Ngayon, when you try to assess yung significance ng risk, of course, some departments are affected much worse than the others. Okay. So, kapag nagkaroon ng meeting, usually, diba, you're trying to raise what problems do we have and what are the causes. And in a way, that helps you identify kung ano yung risk na kinakaharap ng business. Okay. But then, when you try to, you know, ask for input, how serious do you think this type of risk is, or how serious do you think this type of situation is? In a way, minsan magkakaiba sila ng magiging opinion or perspective on the situation. Kasi nga magkakaibang department naman sila. Okay, to one department, it could be, you know, serious already. To other departments, it's not so serious, especially hindi naman nila hindi sila masyadong impacted, ng particular risk. So, in a way, it could cause, you know, arguments and misunderstandings din naman sa departments, between departments. So, what companies have done is to use, you know, voting software na nga lang. So that yung opinions ng bawat isa is, you know, makokollect and then ma-collate ng top management, you know, the decision makers. Okay? But ito, meron tayong mga risk assessment techniques. Kaunahan nga yung voting software, but in a way, it's a type of, you know, questionnaire and checklist. Okay? Etong mga risk assessment techniques na to, ginagamit lang naman to collect information. And because you need the information before you decide which risks are serious enough or not serious enough or significant or not. Okay? So, we have questionnaires and checklists. In a way, ito yung pinakang usual, Use of structured questionnaires and checklists to collect information that will assess to the recognition of the significant risk. And then you have workshops and brainstorming. Medyo, you know, face-to-face na kayo. But this would eat up some time. And then, ito medyo, pag meetings kasi medyo prone to getting sidetracked, talking about other things na hindi naman part of the agenda. So, tapos yung possibility of, you know, arguing with others. Collection and sharing of ideas at workshops to discuss events that could impact the objectives, core processes, or key dependencies. Ang kagandahan nitong workshop compared to the questionnaire is, you know, of course, limited yung responses sa questionnaires, walang follow-up. Ang dito kasi sa workshop, of course, since you're face-to-face, after you delivered your opinion, meron agad, you know, kasi iba-ibang tao kayo, meron agad immediate response, okay? And then you also get, you know, immediate reaction, immediate input na din, okay? Pwedeng it's in a form of a question or in a form of a different perspective or possibility of getting a response agad na, you know, suggestions on how to resolve the situation. Okay? Possible scenarios lang naman, okay? And then you have inspections and audits, physical inspections of premises and activities, and audits of compliance with established systems and procedures. Normally, of course, this is for controls, internal controls ng company. And then yung compliance din with the laws and regulations kung nakakasunod ba sila. Then we have flow charts and dependency analysis of the process and operations within the organization to identify critical components that are key to success. So essentially, you just have yung production process, flow chart from the beginning to the end. And then you try to analyze kung aling part dyan yung very important na pag nagkaroon ng disruption ay greatly affected, or kapag nagkaroon ng problems within the process, alin dyan yung dapat mauna nating i-address or i-prevent natin na magkaroon ng breakdowns or magkaroon ng disruption. Okay. So, ayan. Ito mismo tinitingnan yung process talaga. Okay. And then you have HAZOP and FMEA approaches. Ito yung ibig sabihin. Hazard and operability studies and failure modes effects analysis. These are quantitative technical failure analysis techniques. Okay, so this one is about hazard and operability. The other is about failure modes effects. Okay, so kumbaga ang tinitingnan dito is if the control fails, how is it going to affect the company, or if a certain operation or activity part of the operations or process, kapag merong isa dyan na nag-breakdown nga or nag-fail, how is it going to affect the rest of the company? Okay, is it significant enough or not? Tapos of course you have to think of ways to prevent it if it's significant enough. And then ito pinaka familiar sa atin, SWOT and PESEL analysis. So we have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then you have the other one. This is more on the economic side of things. You have your political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental analysis. Offer structured approaches to risk identification. Kumbaga, you're simply trying to identify how the risk is going to affect these different, aspects of the business. Or if hindi man, yung risk affecting this is how these aspects would affect the risk. Okay, 2 ways. Okay, pabalik. Checklists and questionnaires, advantage, they are usually simple to complete, less time consuming. Tapos yung disadvantage naman niya, any risk not referenced by appropriate questions may not be recognized as significant. Okay, so pagdating naman ito dun sa structure ng questions, inclusions ng questions, have to make sure that you're able to address yung lahat-lahat na. Okay, kasi baka mamaya, because hindi natanong yung isang bagay, edi yun, walang nasagot o walang naging response yung mga tao or mga employees. Okay. Next, advantages and disadvantages ng mga risk assessment techniques na na-identify kanina. Okay, so for questionnaires and checklists, advantages niya, consistent structure guarantees consistency, greater involvement than in a workshop. Siguro kasi bawat isa, halos, syempre, if you're given a questionnaire or checklist, you're going to have to accomplish it, diba? But in a workshop, sometimes yung mga, outspoken people lang talaga yung nag-engage or nagsasalita during a workshop. And the others who are not very assertive ay hindi masyado, syempre, na nagre-raise or nakapagbigay ng input. Okay? So in a way, questionnaires, greater involvement than in a workshop. Tapos yung disadvantages naman niya, rigid approach may result in some risk being missed. Okay? Questions will be based on historical knowledge, so yung possibility na makapag-identify ka ng prospective types of risk ay baka hindi ma-identify. Okay? Workshops and brainstorming, advantage niya, consolidated opinions from all interested parties, greater interaction, produces more ideas. Ito yung nabanggit natin kanina na kapag nag-raise ka ng sarili mong opinion, most of the time meron agad, balik or immediate response from other people. Okay? Kasi nandiyan na, narinig na nila yung sinabi mo. Okay? Disadvantage na senior management tends to dominate because, sila yung mga assertive, sila yung sanay na tawag doon. Hindi naman makipag-argue, but something like that. Okay? They do feel that they're experiencing it. They do feel that they know almost everything that's going on in the business already. Okay? Issues will be missed if incorrect people involved. So, normally, di ba, kung sino yung nakaka-experience firsthand ng risk, they should be in the workshop or during the brainstorming. Kasi sila yung nakakaalam kung paano nangyayari yung risk, how it manifests itself, tapos how it affects yung operations nila sa baba. Okay? Next, we have inspection and audits. Advantage na, physical evidence forms the basis of opinion kasi check mo talaga yung kung ano yung nangyayari. Audit approach results in good structure. Normally kasi may mga recommendations agad on what to do to improve the process, okay? Or to improve the compliance. Disadvantage, inspections are most suitable for hazard risk. So, di ba, if it's about control risk or the other opportunity risk, hindi siya masyadong applicable. Audit approach tends to focus on historical experience. Okay? Yung financial audit, dyan din nagpo-fall. Next, we have flow charts and dependency analysis. Useful output that may be used elsewhere. Normally kasi kapag process, it's almost the same in, similar types of companies or industries. Okay? Kasi, flow charts. Normally, production processes are similar. Okay? Analysis produces better understanding of processes. Disadvantage na, difficult to use for strategic risk, may be very detailed and time-consuming. Okay? Kasi nga, very, specific naman na siya na area. Okay? Process. HAZOP and FMEA approaches, a structured approach that so that no risks are omitted. Ito yung sa advantage niya kasi di ba normally deals with hazard and failure risk. Involvement of a wide range of personnel. Disadvantage niya, most easily applied to manufacturing operations, very analytical and time-consuming approach then. But again, as with any other, itong pagiging time-consuming and very detailed, it could be very helpful in, the development of a manual. Tapos kung hindi naman masyado nag-change, di ba? Let's say yung production process or yung hazard risk na kinakaharap ng company. Normally, it would, yung kanyang relevance ba, na before you update it or before any major changes happens on it, is hindi ganun kataas yung possibility niya. Okay? So, it would be very useful in the long run din naman. Okay, and then we have SWOT and parcel analysis. Advantage, well-established techniques with proven results. SWOT analysis can be linked to strategic decisions. And then you have your focused approach, disadvantage niya. Focused approach that may miss some categories of risk. Totoo naman. And then you have rigid structure restricts imaginative thinking. Kasi diba ito, strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, tapos you have your political, environmental, social, and all that. Okay? But, kumbaga, nakafocus ka kasi doon Kaya in a way, marirestrict talaga. Okay? Although, di ba, medyo overarching din naman itong SWOT and PESA. Okay? Depends on implementation na lang. And simple way of analyzing risk is to identify the key dependencies faced by the organization. Yung key dependencies na tinatawag natin is, of course, yung, di ba, for example, we have different departments. They are in a way dependent on the other. Let's say yung production, di ba, before they can start producing the products or before they can start manufacturing, they would be dependent on the purchasing department to ensure na yung mga raw materials na gagamitin nila ay andyan sa production floor. Tapos, they're also dependent in, let's say, the investment department, di ba, to make sure na kapag merong, new technologies, new machineries, new equipment, they would be provided in the production area then. Kaya naman, di ba, repairs and maintenance, yung mga tao na responsible for that, they have to make sure na lahat ng machineries, equipment in the production area are working well. Okay, di ba? And of course, they have to ensure na during the production then, di ba, they have enough people to work on the floor. So, in a way, di ba, HR, and then, of course, yung payment, let's say, salaries and wages ng mga tao, then you have your finance or accounting. And, of course, all the transactions involved, di ba, from, movement of raw materials to the production process, di ba, working process, hanggang sa matapos siya maging finished goods and then may benta, di ba, relate ulit sa sales department naman. Okay. And in a way, di ba, interconnected, yung mga departments. So, there are key dependencies there. Okay. And then, yung key dependencies na yon, kailangan kasi nila ma-identify if one of those, let's say, departments or one of those particular role, hindi kayang mag-perform for some reason. Diba? Let's say, nagkaroon ng sakit yung mga tao. Or let's say, nagkaroon ng aksidente. Hindi makapagtrabaho yung, some people. So, ayun, how large would be the effect on the company as a whole. Kasi affected, di ba, yung iba-ibang departments if one of them would fail at a certain time. So, yun. Yun yung key dependencies. And dito sa risk management, they're trying to, address that para mapaghandaan din. Di ba, yung tipong merong, okay, kailangan, pag wala siya, substitute, ikaw muna magsa-substitute sa kanya, ganyan. Okay? Aspects of the business that are fundamentally important to its future success. Okay. Factors that are required for success. So, in a way, yung key dependencies pa din. Further analyzed by asking what could impact each of them. So, sa hazard analysis, what could undermine each of these key dependencies? Sa control risk naman, what would cause uncertainty about these key dependencies? Pag-opportunity risk, what events or circumstances would enhance the status of each of the key dependencies? Okay. So, ayan. Quantification of risk exposure is essential. Kasi the quantification, parang, makita mo kung ano yung magiging effect or impact ng particular risk to the company. Normally, they try to put it in financial terms para alam ng company how much resources would be used to address such a risk or how it's going to undermine the resources if it ever happens at napabayaan. Okay. Particularly important for financial institutions. Risk workshops, most common. Common view of understanding of which risk is achieved. However, disadvantages can be that more senior people in the room may dominate the conversation and contradicting their opinions may be difficult and unwelcome. Okay. So, yeah. Sometimes workshops don't work. Okay. Okay, so, di ba balik tayo sa risk matrix? Paano siya ginagamit sa risk assessment? Di ba yung risk assessment, we have risk recognition and risk rating. So, dun sa rating or ranking the risk, pwedeng gamitin yung risk matrix natin. What scope exists, cost-effective improvement. Ayan. So, di ba, yun nga. Although there could be a variety of, solutions to the problems or additional controls that could be implemented by the company, not every company has the resources to implement such measures. So, ayan nga. Have to consider then yung cost-effective or cost-benefit niya for the company. So, yung sa risk matrix, yung most common form niya is yung kino-consider lang naman, yung likelihood and impact. So, again, di ba yung likelihood is, the probability of it happening, and then yung impact is how much damage would it result to. Okay? Scope for achieving further risk improvement, and pinapakita din doon. Level of risk, additional measures that can be taken to improve the management of that risk. Okay. Impact in excess of the benchmark test for significance for that type of risk. Okay. Okay. ito kung meron lang naman na benchmark. Pero kung walang benchmark and it's your first time dealing with it, then, in a way, capacity ng organization yung unang tinitingnan. Okay? So, ito yung kailangan i-decide. Magnitude of the event should the risk materialize. Gano'ng kalaki? Or gano'ng kalaki yung effect. And then, size of the impact that the event would have on the organization. Likelihood of the risk materializing or at or above the benchmark. Scope for further improvement in control. Okay? Clear identification of priority, significant risk. Normally, ito nga yung sinabi. Total number of risks identified between 100 and 200, pero hindi naman lahat yan significant. So, after yung risk rating, yung number of priority significant risk, magiging between 10 and 20 na lang. Okay? So, ayan. Marami naman kasing risk na kapag andyan, kumbaga, pag tingnan mo, consider mo tong apat na to, hindi naman ganun kalaki yung impact niya, hindi naman gaano gagastos yung company if ever na mag-materialize siya, or yung possibility of it happening, hindi naman ganun kataas. It could occur, let's say, once a year lang, twice a year, ganyan. Pero hindi naman madalas. Okay? So, mga ganun. So, from 100 to 200, normally, magiging 10 to 20 lang yung, mga serious risk natin. Okay, risk perception, ayan. Nabanggit natin kanina during collection of opinions. Medyo magkakaibang opinions even though we're talking about the same risk. Kasi nga, from different departments, magkakaiba yung naging effect ng risk and magkakaiba din yung kanilang perspective on it because of that. So, mas prefer nila dito yung paggamit ng voting software. And then, so workshop naman, ito yung nangyayari. They discuss why people have different views of a risk. And then they could reach an agreed common position. More appropriate control measures will then be identified and implemented. Okay? Possibility yan. And then ito, the other one, kapag merong, differences in opinions nga, draw opinions from all levels of management, from the bottom to the top, so that different perspectives of a risk can be identified. Yung benefits nito, better risk communication, fuller understanding of the risk, and the identification of proper and practical control measures. Ayan. Medyo time-consuming siya, saka, resource-intensive exercise, but at least you're able to achieve this. Ito, better risk communication, fuller understanding, and then identification of proper measures. Tapos, ito pa yung different. I have to realize and accept the public understanding and perception of risk may not be sufficiently informed or entirely objective, diba? Since yung public naman, it's an external party or external party. They don't know what's going on inside the business. So sometimes they would be unable to understand yung reasons for you implementing new controls or any decision that the management would make to address those risks na identify nila within their organization. Okay? So, ayan. Etong isa, sa BBC ito, I'm not sure if you have this in the Philippines. Kapag sila ay nagre-report, BBC journalist, pag nagre-report sila tapos merong coverage ng risk, may mga requirements sila to follow to make sure na pati yung public na nanonood sa kanila ay merong maayos na pagkaunawa dun sa nire-report nila na risk. Ensure the context is clear and avoid distortion of the risk. In a way, kaya naglilipa na yung mga fake news dito sa atin is merong mga tao kasi na tamad magbasa sa kabuuan ng isang report. Minsan headline na sometimes misleading pa or provocative, pero hindi, kumbaga headline lang, yun ang binasa. Tapos from that headline, yun na, nag-isip na lang kung anek-anek, tapos ay nagkalat na ng sariling opinion or reaction niya patungkol dun sa headline na nabasa niya. Misleading nga yung headline or provocative na, they're trying to, hindi naman entice. What's the word? parang, tawag doon, in-encourage na mag-react ka in a negative way, hoping na you would read the whole report. Pero anong nangyari nga, majority do not read the whole report. Kasi if you did read the whole report, you'd understand na, medyo parang sinagot niya lang yung headline or kinontradict niya yung headline. Kasi some of the headlines, di ba, nauuso ngayon yung headlines na question mark ang dulo. So, kumbaga, since it's a question mark, it may or may not be true. Tapos, pag binasa mo yung whole report, napatunayan na it's not true. Okay? But then again, majority nga ng tao, hindi binabasa yung full report and then they believe the misleading title. Okay? So, ayun. Very disappointing. But anyway, ito, ensure the context is clear, avoid distortion of the risk. Okay naman na ngayon, kasi yung reporting about COVID, hindi na ganun katalamak. And in a way, medyo ayos na yung mga naging result. But still, we're trying to be vigilant because of the new variant. Pero back then, 2020, sorry. Okay, in 2020, what I hated about the news reporting is that ang nire-report lang nila numbers, yung pataas na numbers, okay? Tapos daily, ito yung nadadagdag, number of new cases, number of deaths, yun yung nire-report. But what I hated there is that they failed to provide yung other information that could increase the understanding of the public sana. Okay? Kasi ando naman na sila, they have the capability, the resources to disseminate information to the public. Pero, bakit ba hindi binibigay na maayos yung, tawag dito, yung information? For example, what I want to hear every time na magre-report sila nung, mga additions to the numbers is that they have to assure the public na out of all the cases, di ba, about 20% lang ang serious cases. The rest ng 80%, hindi serious, hindi nangangailangan ng hospitalization, and most likely asymptomatic. Hindi nakakaramdam ng kung ano mang sakit, parang normal pa din. Na yun nga, sinasabi ng iba, parang trangkaso na naman talaga. Okay, but then yung 20% na serious, sometimes na yun nangangailangan ng hospitalization, hindi makahinga ng maayos, inuubo ng matindi, or kung ano man, ganyan. Tapos out of the 20% na serious, di ba, yan yung, ang pinaprevent lang naman, kaya serious yung COVID, is that yung transmission niya mas mabilis compared sa regular flu. And ang main concern naman talaga is yung healthcare system would not be able to accommodate yung, di ba, yung 20%. Yung yan ay dumami bigla, sabay-sabay ang tao, 20% of the population would need hospitalization. Hindi sila kayang i-accommodate, okay? Yun lang naman talaga yung seriousness ng COVID, okay? And then out of the total cases nga, only 2 to 5% yung mga namamatay. Okay, it's still a bad thing. It could be prevented pa rin naman kung mag-iingat ang mga tao. Pero, diba, minsan na. Pero yun, I don't hear the news reporting or reiterating itong, kumbaga, ito, kasi yun yung pinaka-main point. This would kumbaga, dissuade sana yung mga tao na hindi nakakaunawa kung bakit ba siniseryoso ng government itong pag-manage ng COVID, or yung kanilang, what do you call it? How they're trying to mitigate yung pagkalat ng virus, okay? But, again, it's kind of disappointing kasi ang dami mong maririnig na, di ba, theories, or kung ano-ano mga opinion na, of course, kino-contradict because they want to go out already and to work and to earn for their families. Understandable din naman. But, di ba, pwede naman kasi na magkaunawaan kayo, but a failure of communication. Kumbaga. Okay. So, mayroong mga ganon. Okay. Pero dito sa BBC journalist, meron silang ganito. Diba? Meron silang sinusunod na guidelines. And this would be very good if all of our journalists here in the Philippines would also follow. Now, when you are trying to report on a particular risk, you let the public understand, you let your audience understand kung patungkol saan ba yung risk na yan. Ano-ano yung mga affected. Okay. Tapos, of course, you have your proper statistics. Ito pa isang kinakayawang ko dito is, di ba yung mga survey, tapos mga nagre-report ng survey, ng statistics. The thing is, kumaga unreliable kasi yung source of the survey mo. And then, let's say, out of the 100 million Filipinos, di ba, ilan lang ang tinanong mo, or ilan lang ang respondents nyo dun sa survey nyo, 1,000 lang. Diba? How could that be reliable man lang? Yung reporter, kailangan mapaunawa niya dun sa kanyang audience na only 1,000 people ang involved dito sa survey na to. So, it's not really reliable na sabihin mo na 6 out of 10 Filipinos are still, supportive of this and that and whatnot. It's still misleading. Okay? Maniwala pa ako kung at least 50% ng adult Filipinos ang ginamit din sa survey mo. But again, of course, it's not possible, diba? Unless, of course, election. Gamitan mo rin ng ginagamit sa election, diba? Na lahat ng registered voters, of course, would have their input towards the results of that, numbers. Okay, may mga ganun. Anyway, let's move on. Risk appetite. So, of course, when you assess the risk, na-assess mo na, significance na, you have to consider itong risk appetite. Kasi iba't ibang companies, magkakaiba sila ng risk appetite. Merong, tawag dito nga, risk averse, merong risk aggressive naman. Okay? And, kumbaga, kailangan identify nyo muna ano yung acceptability or level of acceptability sa organization ng iba't ibang level of risk. Okay? So, ito yung example, risk appetite matrix. Ito yung dark area can be considered to be the universe of risk for the organization. Tawag dito. Graph siya, no? Itong part na to, ito yung likelihood. And then this part here is the impact. Okay? Low likelihood, papunta sa increasing likelihood. Low impact, papunta sa mataas na impact. So, understandably, itong part dito, yung kukonsider natin as significant or serious, di ba? Mataas yung likelihood, mataas pa yung impact. Okay? Kapag dito, mababa yung likelihood, mababa yung impact, could be, hindi masyadong serious kasi mababa lang naman yung possibility na mangyari siya, and mangyari man siya, mababa lang din yung impact, right? Tapos itong sa gitna, of course, medyo, ayan na yung borderline. Medyo malapit na maging serious, okay? Pero hindi pa rin naman serious kasi, kumbaga, yung level of impact and likelihood niya within the risk, either within the risk appetite pa rin ng company, okay? But beyond this, ito, yung mataas na yung impact, mataas yung likelihood, tapos ito yung, kumbaga, hindi na carry ng company. In case na mangyari siya, kumbaga, is do we have the capability to deal with it? So, ito yung serious, okay? Concerned zone. Ayan. Comfort zone, cautious zone. Medyo mag-iingat ka na dito. Tapos ito yung concerned zone. We have to deal with it. Okay? So, ito, risk averse. Kapag risk averse, kaya mas malaki yung, yung concerned zone niya. Kasi nga, risk averse ka. You do not want, halos, kumbaga, let's say 60% pa lang yung likelihood. Pero kino-consider mo na siya serious. You want to prepare for it already. Kaya mas malaki yung concern zone niya dito. Compare dito sa risk aggressive. Kapag risk aggressive kasi nga, risk taker ka naman, itong mga kahit nandito na, kahit 70% na yung likelihood and impact niya, carry mo pa din. Kumbaga, okay lang yan, ganyan. Tapos kapag medyo mga 85 na or 90%, saka mo palang kino-consider talaga na serious. So, kapag risk aggressive yung company, ayan. Kumbaga, mas konti yung na iiwan na concerned zone sila. Okay? Kasi yung iba, medyo, carry pa, kaya lang nilang i-deal. Okay? Kasi in a way, itong mga risk-aggressive companies na to, they're used to dealing with the risk naman. Okay? Medyo sanay na sila. Experience na din. Ayan. They know what to do. They know what they will do. Okay? So, ayan. Universal risk, ito yung pangkalahatan na yan. Okay? Phrase often used by internal auditors to identify audit priorities. Yung figure, nakita natin diba yung level of risk that organization feels comfortable taking. Pinag-compare yung risk averse saka risk aggressive. So regardless of the likelihood of the risk materializing, the impact is so small that it would not be significant if it did materialize. Ito yung comfort zone, Itong zone na to. An example, not consider the consequences of a jumbo jet crash landing on their site kasi very minute yung possibility na mangyari yan. Global financial crisis, unlikely to occur that they could be ignored. Okay? And look what happened in 2008. Inignore. Okay? They did not prepare for it. And so, nung nangyari siya, markets failed. Okay? Low likelihood, low impact risk will be tolerable. Medium likelihood, medium impact will require some judgment before acceptance. Tapos yung high likelihood, high impact, di syempre intolerable, has to be treated. Okay? Organizations will need to take a risk-by-risk approach one at a time. Set tolerance level. Okay? Hanggang saan ba yung kaya nating sigmurain? Okay? And then you have your that should be indication ng risk appetite. A feature of the enterprise risk management approach, in a way, diba, yung kapag kinonsider mo yung input ng bawat different departments and then you consider the interrelationships between the departments before you create yung solutions mo to address the risk. In a way, that's ERM na din. ERM approach. Organizations will have an appetite to continue a particular operation, embark on a project, or embrace a strategy rather than a direct appetite for the risk itself. Okay. Of course naman, hindi naman talaga direct na yung risk ang dinideal with ng mga organizations. Normally, it's a situation, and in that situation, andun yung possibility ng risk. Risk appetite and risk exposure should be considered as a consequence of business decisions rather than a driver of those decisions. Okay? Before a company makes a decision, before the top level management makes a decision, part ng mga considerations nila, yung risk appetite, risk exposure, and of course, yung risk management process na. Okay? Risk should not be managed out of context. Kaya mas mabuti na maunawaan kung patungkol saan talaga yung risk. Kasi kung ma-misunderstand mo siya, ma-take mo siya out of context, then the possibility na yung measures mo na implement later on to mitigate that risk is hindi maging successful. Diba? Kasi nga, you misunderstood the risk. Okay, the risk can then be prioritized as high likelihood, medium likelihood, and low likelihood. Tapos on the other side, yung high impact, medium impact, and low impact. How likely, how much. Okay? Yung likelihood, how likely. And then yung impact, how much yung magiging financial effect on the company kapag nangyari siya. So, neither of these approaches is better than the other. Normally, combination of them. A matter of risk appetite and risk perception as to which approach an individual board member or collective board itself may prefer. Okay. Kaya nga, magkakaibang company, syempre magkakaiba rin ng tao na leaders or decision makers. So yun, magkakaiba talaga yung magiging responses to risk. Magkakaiba yung kanilang decisions under their risk management process. Okay, so ayan. Buying a car, yung example niya dito. Okay, benefits obtained must exceed the cost involved. Yun yung pinaka-main point. But of course, depending on may pera ka ba, kaya mong waldasin naman sa pagbili ng car, edi go ahead. Pero di ba kung wala kang pera, huhulugan mo yung car, Pero kung kailangan mo talaga siya kasi yung trabaho mo is, required to travel to and fro, edi you might as well go ahead. But again, di ba, yung have to consider insurance, maintenance, change oil, gas, ayan. So, yeah. Remember that the opportunity risk enhance the possible achievement of the benefits of owning a car. The control risk increase uncertainty or doubt about achieving these benefits, and the hazard risk inhibit the achievement of the car ownership benefits. So you can read this one para ma-identify nyo yung sa hazard, control, and opportunity risk na pinag-assign nyo dyan. Okay? Alright, so that's it for this one. Again, this is for risk assessment. Okay, so that's it. Thanks and bye.